Purely IFS, a show that aims to support mental health professionals in using internal family systems therapy as their primary approach with clients. I'm Gayle Williamson.
And I'm E Redfern.
In today's episode, we're going to go through a supervisee case example in detail, which is really interesting, but it's also great for highlighting the importance of specific IFS supervision if you're practicing as an IFS therapist.
Yes, if you have any experience of using the model and helping a client go inside to get to know a part, you will already have some awareness that it's not really possible to predict in advance how things will go. You and the client might be able to come up with a conscious, rational explanation for the problematic behaviour or whatever it is, but when you go inside, it's often a very different story. And this is as true for therapists using IFS in their practices and trying to be aware of their parts as it is for their clients, where we can sometimes be unaware of some of our own parts.
Yes, I'm not sure the supervisee here would have gotten to where she did without hearing directly from her parts, particularly as it was related to something she'd actually forgotten about. So I run a professional supervision group for therapists who use the IFS model in their practices, and occasionally there are opportunities to do some practice. On this particular week, one of the regular participants, Tina, raised her struggles with a client who had suffered several losses, and Tina felt she was too raw for IFS work. Tina was also having trouble seeing the distress in her client as coming from a part that she could come alongside. She'd essentially gone back to her old way of being as a therapist. The group discussed this and how often when you're transitioning to IFS, it's necessary to let go of some fearful beliefs that can be picked up in our foundation training, such as fears around re-traumatization or destabilizing the client, where we're often told just focus on teaching self-regulation techniques. Stabilize the client first before you venture near any traumatic material.
Here, Gayle, I'm remembering my own previous training in EMDR, when I learned all about resource development and installation for clients. I quickly realised that this was mostly or as much as for the benefit of therapists, so that our parts would be less afraid of clients going to places of distress inside. In IFS, we have other things we can rely on to increase a felt sense of safety for protectors fearful of emotional overwhelm. One is that we can seek explicit consent of protectors before approaching the exile, which will probably involve addressing their concerns and letting them know they can jump back into the driving seat if they feel they need to. And there are some great examples of this in my latest IFS book, by the way. Details will be in the show notes.
It's your fourth book, I believe, Emma. Amazing.
Yes, thank you. It's called Internal Family Systems, Making a Start and Getting Curious. And it has a beautiful blue underwater scene on the cover. So, as I was saying, we seek protectors' consent before going to exiles, and that might sound like, Jason, before we go to that part, can you just ask inside if anyone has any concerns about us doing that?
Sure, and in IFS, the safeguards are built into the model in the form of our protectors. This means that we carefully attend to the wisdom of the client's system. And to give a basic example of what this looks like, say a client had suffered a violent attack. We would understand that there was an exile holding the pain and the fear of the experience, who we would ultimately aim to help. But if we guide the person to go inside and focus on, for example, the part who was attacked, it's unlikely that their system will allow access to this part first, unless, of course, they come to session already overwhelmed by that part, and we'll come back to how to deal with that situation later. Instead, when you invite the client to focus on the part holding the trauma and ask how they feel towards it, you may hear, I'm scared of it, or it feels too big, or even I don't know, it's like it's not there anymore. So, in other words, protectors have stepped forward, perhaps one causing a lot of fear to stop the person from connecting to the exile, who it's worried will overwhelm the person, or another that simply puts some kind of block between the client and the exile so that the exile can't be felt anymore. We'd get to know, negotiate with, and update the first protector we meet, and then there would likely be other protectors we'd also need to spend time with. And only when the client gets to a point where they can access sufficient self, which may, of course, take many sessions, will they be able to go safely to the trauma, that is, connect to and begin helping the exile.
Hmm. So back to Tina, you've discussed the impact of outdated pre-IFS beliefs around grief, and it makes sense that this may be what's keeping Tina from helping her client be with her grieving parts. And yet Tina appears still wary of using the model with her client. And I guess this is the point at which IFS supervision might have an advantage over other forms of supervision, as we know we can work directly with therapist parts, which is more likely to lead to becoming unstuck than discussing what to do or not to do and relying maybe on cognitive understanding to shift something.
Yeah, so I thought maybe this was a good opportunity to help Tina get to know the parts that were blocking her, as well as a chance for one of the others in the supervision group to get some practice in. Dave volunteered and began using the protocol and helping Tina get to know the part afraid of using IFS with this Greek client, a long name, but useful in terms of staying open as to who this part was. It became clear, however, that the fearful part was strong because other parts were coming in a lot trying to deflect from it, particularly one that was doing a lot of describing, that is, distracting. So eventually Dave asked if I could take over. As is often the case when strong emotions are involved, I judged that explicit direct access was probably the most efficient way to go. And what we'll do is we'll pick up the dialogue from here with Emma voicing the supervisee, Tina. So there's a part, Tina, that fears taking the risk of doing parts work with your client,
Yeah, and it could be so liberating.
but other parts of you are unsure.
No.
So this part that's fearful of taking the risk, Tina, do you still feel it?
It's very familiar to me.
Okay, well, I'd like to speak to this part if possible, the one who's scared of using IFS with this client who's got considerable grief by the signs of it. And I'm sure that you've got good reason for that. I'd just like to understand more about your fear.
Because it's kind of scary just to take the chance. I'd be mortified if I said something to offend the client.
Okay.
Mortified.
Ah, so you're scared that Tina may offend the client in some way. She might say the wrong thing.
Yeah, and then there's nowhere to go. And the client could tell on her. What if the client says something to somebody about her, like complains about her?
Okay. And what would happen then?
It's kind of like, has she backed the wrong horse? IFS. Is this the career she should be doing? Is this the way she should be practicing? Because I don't know. It's not that she's got it wrong before, but you can just run into opposing views and be embarrassed.
So Tina will end up mortified because she's made the wrong decision. Is that right? So I guess I would like to ask you, has that ever happened before?
Sure, she's been happy with her decisions, but others not.
Tina's been happy, but others haven't.
Yeah, always having to justify the decisions, always.
Oh, is there a particular experience that comes to mind where Tina had to justify herself?
Well, yes, there is a couple of things that she's done that weren't met kindly. Well, actually, a few things in her life.
Is this part showing you different situations, Tina?
Yes, yes, it is.
Is it maybe making more sense to you why this part is fearful about you taking risks or doing something different? Because I guess IFS is different, right? I guess different to the mainstream.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, Tina, how this part feels right now. I mean, do you notice any response in this part?
I do. It's like a coolness comes over my chest. It's like you named it, the fear, and there was no harm or harshness in it. And I was just brought to those times, and that's okay.
So, just to pause here for listeners and explain, at this point, Tina was visibly relaxing, and it seemed that the part felt understood, that the part is now not so reactive in relation to the past situations it's shown Tina. Those memories now feel okay. And in terms of process, listeners might want to note the switch from explicit direct access with the part to talking to self. And as we continue here, you'll hear I'm now able to go on to facilitate insight with one of the exiles that this fearful part was protecting. So it's making more sense why this part was so fearful. And we don't have to get into it, Tina, but is there something in relation to grief or loss? Is there something directly relevant there? Or is it more to do with doing something different?
Yeah, it's not grief. It's to do with doing something different or risky. And actually, it's brought me back to a memory I had totally forgotten.
Oh, do you want to say a bit more about that?
What? Yeah, sure. When I left school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So after I did my leaving certificate, I tried some acting for a while. And I come from a small town, and there was a lot of ridicule. A lot.
Oh,
It didn't work out.
it didn't work out. And I'm just wondering, Tina, are you feeling one of those parts right now? One of the parts who was ridiculed?
Yes, she was a laughing stock.
I'm wondering if you're actually seeing a part right now, or are you just feeling it?
Just feeling it. The number 17's coming up. That was my age.
And how do you feel towards her, Tina?
Oh, like just to give her a hug. I'm just sad for her. People can be cruel.
Yeah, I'm just going to check, Tina. Is there maybe another part there that just wants to rush in and make her feel better?
No, it feels like I'm just there with her.
Okay, and seems like you're feeling a lot of compassion for her.
Sure, yes.
Maybe you can share some of that warmth you feel with her.
Yeah.
And I know you do your own work with an IFS therapist. I'm wondering, would it be an idea to tell this part that you're going to come back to her and help her? That you're so glad you know about her now?
Yeah, yeah.
Tina was looking relieved and letting a breath go here. And you know the part we started with, Tina, the fearful part? Do you think you could go back to it?
Yeah, it's not so clear. It's there, but not so strong.
And do you have any sense of how you're feeling towards it now?
There's less fear.
Less fear of it or less fear in the part?
A little of both.
And do you feel you can thank that part now for what it's been doing?
Oh, yes, I can. It's very clear now.
Clear what the part has been doing?
Yes, crystal clear.
That's great. Okay to stop there?
Yes. So I imagine this bit of work was very impactful for Tina.
Yeah, I think it was. And surprising too. Tina really wasn't expecting to end up where she did, but it made such sense to her of why she'd been struggling with this client.
Yes, where her protectors were reading IFS as different, in the same way that acting was a different and, I'd suggest, a brave choice for her as a teenager. So they were stopping her from using the IFS model with her grieving client in a bid to prevent an exile who was humiliated in the past from being triggered.
And of course, now Tina knows about this exile, and hopefully she'll be able to heal her in her personal therapy. And I'd expect that this will free her up in terms of her IFS practice. Although, of course, as we know, it's rarely as simple as healing a single part. So it will help, but it won't be the full solution. There may be other related or similar experiences.
Hmm. There were a couple of things that might be good to highlight from the transcript in terms of the befriending questions from the protector protocol.
Sure. So at the start of using explicit direct access with the part stopping Tina from using IFS, it made sense to me to go straight into asking about the part's fears rather than asking about its job, for instance. The part was worried that Tina would somehow offend the client and then the client would complain about her and then Tina would feel like she made the wrong decision about her life.
So you persisted, one of the 5 Ps of self-leadership. You drilled down, awful term, reminds me of dentist, but anyway, to get to more of the core fear. And I guess you could have kept going, asked, for example, what would be really bad about Tina possibly making the wrong decision in fully embracing IFS. And you would probably have arrived at the same place, a memory of her 17-year-old self.
Absolutely. However, I chose to ask when the part said Tina will end up mortified because she's made the wrong decision. Has that ever happened before? And then when several examples came up in response, I asked, was there a particular experience that came to mind? And I just wanted to highlight this as another option in terms of language use, the questions that we might ask parts, and gaining information about the exiles being protected. Also, as we said at the start, you can never tell where you're going to end up in this work. You can go very deep, very quickly. So this was all quite a surprise to Tina, and although she was very emotional when the connection to the exile was made, she never got overwhelmed at any point, but she could have. And so it's really good to make sure you're familiar with the No-overwhelm contract.
Yes, it's another safety feature that can reassure therapist parts, and it's something I find supervisees sometimes forget about.
And it's useful when meeting with either protectors or exiles. We'll give an example of using it with an exile shortly.
Sure, but regarding working with protectors, I was lucky in an IFS training. I got to be a client with Dick Schwartz, who offered this intervention. It was so reassuring for my protectors to hear that if they gave permission to go to an exile, we could ask that exile not to overwhelm the system, and that if the exile part agreed, then it wouldn't overwhelm the system. After all, distressed parts tend to want to connect, and flooding or overwhelming a system keeps them isolated and alone, whereas allowing space for self to come alongside them and be with them in their distress brings connection and possibility. It's the beginning of and part of the redo or corrective experience the part never had.
Yes, so while obviously it's great if we can help our own parts, I think at the same time it's natural that parts of us may at times get triggered in sessions, depending on the client, what they're bringing, and also on what's going on in the therapist's life. I think there sometimes can be a bit of shame experienced if we get triggered, as though we, our systems, should never react and instead should be perfectly in self. But actually, oftentimes this is tough work. We have a lot coming at us. So, as we said earlier, the typical self-regulation techniques that we may teach clients may be as much about reassuring our own parts as helping the client's parts to calm. And the No-overwhelm Contract is the IFS equivalent, I guess.
Yes, I think professionals who are new to IFS need time to trust that IFS can really work, in inverted commas.
That it maybe seems too easy. You just talk to the part and then it calms? Really?
Yes. So, shall we role play an example of how to use no overwhelm intervention with an XR? You could be a
Sure.
panicking client and I'll be the therapist this time.
Yeah, okay. I'm starting to feel really, really anxious. Oh, it's really bad. My heart feels like it's going too fast. What do I do?
I hear you, Gail. You're experiencing some panic and anxiety, and I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. Can you hear me? Maybe you could look at me. Yes, great.
I just feel so anxious.
Yes, I'm getting that. And are you aware that it's a part of you, Gail, that's taking over right now? There's a part here who's clearly feeling and communicating distress, anxiety, and I'm hoping it can feel me with it. I see you nodding, and I'll talk to you as the part from here. It would be great if you could dial back the intensity of what you're feeling just a little. And you may not know that parts can do that. It can be so helpful. Then that way, Gail, who's not a part, can be here with you, as well as me being here with you. Would you be willing to give that a go? I see you're shaking your head.
Uh, it seems just as strong. Actually, maybe even stronger.
Ah, okay, like the part ramped it up a little even.
Yeah,
Well, I don't want to give the upset one the wrong impression. I'm not asking anybody to go away. I'm not asking you to go away. You're welcome, and my sense is we'll find your feelings make sense too. If you pull your energy back a little, it's less likely a protector will come in and push you out of the driving seat in there, and it's more likely self can be with you.
okay, now I can feel the part is pulling back. Thank you, Emma. I feel much better. So, just to say for listeners, usually the first time the therapist speaks to the part that's overwhelming a client and explains so that if they can just make themselves smaller, then their self will be able to be with them and they won't feel so alone. Then usually the client will very quickly become calmer and be able to report to you that the part has indeed pulled back. But sometimes when you check how the part has responded, the client will report no change whatsoever.
Sure, and that's when it's helpful to, in IFS terms, hold our seat and not let our own fearful parts take us over. The more calm self energy and presence we can access, the better. rather than perhaps falling back on pre-IFS ways of responding to emotional overwhelm by reaching for a technique of some kind.
Yes, I think IFS beginners should feel okay if they need to do that. It
Mm,
takes time, after all, to build confidence in the model and their own self energy and presence. But I always encourage trainees to stay IFS if they can and really take on board that the way we help a client regulate is through relationship.
sure. And personally, my parts tend not to react well to someone wanting them to do a grounding technique of some kind.
Like distracting them by getting them to name things in the room they're in or trying to focus their attention on their breathing, which effectively means they turn away from whatever part is in distress.
Yes, although the breathing thing can sometimes be offered very relationally, as in the client talking to their partner suggesting, let's both breathe together, which is a way to remind the overwhelming part that the client is available for relationship in these difficult moments. Or the idea that the body, i.e., the breathing, can be a resource for the part, not a way to avoid it.
Sure, the intention being to make some space in order to be able to turn towards such stress and not away from it.
Maybe to end, we could talk a little about that phrase, staying IFS. I'm thinking that it might mean different things to different people and even look different in different situations. For example, in the case of a grieving or very distressed client, it might be that the IFS therapist chooses to be the self to the client's system, witnessing and validating the distressed part or parts for a while. Then, perhaps in a different session, they might choose to ask if the client is ready to go inside and see if a part needs or wants their self to be with them.
Sure, so I guess we're Sure. So I guess you're highlighting that doing IFS isn't just about facilitating insight using the protocols or doing explicit direct access with a part, that we're still practicing IFS when we're holding the model in mind and doing our parts detecting, working implicitly and bearing in mind what it might be helpful for parts to hear, being the self to the system, as you say. And I suppose it's when it's hard to access that choice in the moment between working explicitly or implicitly that IFS supervision can be so helpful.
Absolutely. And hopefully, this episode has been helpful to listeners.
Yeah, I'm sure it has.
Bye for now, Gail. Bye, everyone. Oh, we don't need to do that because you've got one already. Goodo. Sorry.
Stop the recording.